want to tell you a tale about a guy and a gal who fell in love in college and went on to go travel around the United States a couple of years here and there. Spent 15 years away from their home state of Georgia. But then in 2007 had an opportunity to come back home, and they were looking for a place to buy their dream home. And they looked and they looked and they looked. And they finally came upon a spot that just so happened to be 3 miles located from where my in-laws resided, which made babysitting a pretty good option for us any day of the week. But it was 3 miles from where my in-laws lived. But it also was 0.6 miles from this nice shiny new school that had just been built about 4 years beforehand. So we looked and we thought, from a family standpoint, being so closely located to our in-laws, to the school, it had to be good, right? Unfortunately, we found out something the hard way, that the school that we chose to send our daughter to initially, and we gave it a good try for 2 years, was focusing more on, shall we say, closing the gap, as opposed to raising the bar. I jumped in with both feet, and so did my wife. We wanted to be active and participate in the school. So they signed me up the first year, as my oldest daughter's 3rd grade year, to be the dad's representative for the PTA. And I said, okay, no problem, sign me up, I'll do it. And then that progressed, and then the 2nd year, they said, oh, Mr. Thompson, you've done such a great job getting the dads all involved in the school. I think you ought to run for PTA. We want you to be PTA president. And then you can be on the local school council, too, because we need more men on the local school council. I said, okay, fine, sign me up. Anything I can do to help improve education for my daughters. But here's what I found out after getting those positions. That there's a fine line, or shall I say a big difference, between parent involvement, parent participation, and parent empowerment, parent governance, parent control, of making those decisions that improve the quality of education for all our children. I found myself in a scenario whereby, because I came from a traditional family, with traditional family values, that said that mom and dad get together after school and sit down at the kitchen table and review homework and try to fill in the gaps where they can, where the kids may have missed something, and at school and reinforce. I found myself at a strategic disadvantage in a school that said that because dad did those things and mom did those things, they felt they didn't have to. I found myself in a situation where we were in a school district whose per pupil revenue was $14,498 per child. But yet, my daughter, because she wasn't a rocket scientist, I mean, she takes after her dad, she wasn't a rocket scientist, but she was a pretty bright girl. She came in the door at the middle, on level. Well, those kids weren't getting pushed to the top. Those kids were told to maintain what they had, to hold the status quo so that we can redirect those government dollars at the bottom to do what? Close the gap. Well, as a result, we gave it a try for 2 years, but we decided to make a move after that 2nd year. And I enrolled my daughter as a founding scholar of Kip Strive Academy, which was a new public charter school that opened up in downtown Atlanta. And our whole life changed, and our daughter's whole life changed. We found ourselves in a situation whereby everybody in the school was about promoting excellence. And everyone, no matter what demographic they came from, was about achievement. I can tell you with total honesty, this was a unique school because it happened to be a school where folks actually rode the MARTA bus. Kids got off at the MARTA bus stop in front of the school, while some other kids actually got dropped off by Mercedes-Benz. And they were all going to the same school. They were all functioning at a high level. And when I found out just how much money that school was getting, because it was a public charter school as opposed to a traditional school, it really blew my mind and even deepened my commitment to education reform. Because I came from a school that had over $14,000 that was being allocated to education, to go into a public charter school where they only had about $8,900 that they got from the system to educate my daughter. But they were serving her needs, and she was achieving at a much higher level, and so too were her counterparts. All of this involvement really led to me becoming a real diehard charter school advocate. And I became a member of the Georgia Charter School Association Parent Advocacy Committee. And it was out of that experience that we sat down and we talked about one day, how do we prevent more dads like me having to go through this experience? And at that meeting, we asked the question, how do we change the face of public education reform? And after all of my struggles, I simply said this. Well, first of all, we need to change the face of who is carrying our message. And they said, well, what are you talking about, Rich? And I said, you know what, I come from a school where, and ladies, don't get mad, I came from a school where it's always pretty driven by the ladies. And they controlled the meetings, and everything was about, well, what did we do last year? When I came in with my pro-business acumen and decided to say, well, okay, well, how much does this cost, and how can we get more bang for the buck, and how can we increase achievement, it wasn't that well received. I said, we need to create an opportunity for dads who think that way, based upon their experience, their upbringing, can have a forum where they can best represent their children. So we created an entity called 100 Dads. And our goal is pretty much real simple. We got to redefine the cultural expectations of fathers and public education in this country. Dad, you are more than a guy who carries the box of Girl Scout cookies in the building so that the ladies don't have to worry about lifting the heavy stuff. Guys, you are more than a guy who folds and unfolds the tables and the chairs before and after the event. Children, we have a responsibility given to us by God to lead by example. And that goes beyond the household, beyond our church, but it goes to our neighborhood school around the block. So I'm giving you a clarion call today to remind yourselves that God put us on this earth to do a little bit more than just pass time, but to make a difference in the process. Because you see, life falls in basically 3 boxes for us. We can either be in box 1, where we focus on managing the present. In public education, we've done a lot of that. We've managed the present quite loosely over the last 10 years. We had a little thing called No Child Left Behind. Had some good parts, but also had a little bad. But it was all about managing the present to kind of make things look a little bit better than they really were. Box 2, we have an approach where we can selectively forget the past. We can just choose to remember the good stuff and forget about the bad stuff. But what has happened in some instances, we've forgotten about a lot of the good. And we keep kind of churning the bad because that fuels more funding to some programs. Because as long as you got a problem, there's always a grant out there that the federal government can supply your needs. But if we start focusing on the good things that we used to have in our school systems, like for instance, guys and girls walking in the class in a straight line, guys and girls standing up erect and putting their hand over their heart and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. A little simple thing like, perhaps, just maybe having a teacher who, instead of sending the kid to the office because he's got a snotty nose or he's got a headache, just doing the little things they used to do when I was in school. And that's going in the pocketbook, finding something that can fix the remedy, taking care of the need, and letting that kid sit in the classroom and keep learning. We don't need a school full of nurses and social workers. We just need an environment of people who care about children, who care about learning. But then there's box number 3, and I'll wrap this one up on this. Box number 3 is you can choose to be in the role of just creating a brighter future and doing something different. Doing something different that has lasting results. And we can do that in 3 ways, ladies and gentlemen. 1, we can continue to focus on an environment that improves academic rigor in our classrooms. We are getting our tails beat by some people across the waters who don't necessarily like us. They buy our debt and they charge us extremely high rates of interest, but let's just face it, they are our competition. And if we don't make our system a little bit more stringent and tougher, our kids will continue to be second rate. Number 2, we need to look at ways of having more local governance of our neighborhood schools. And the last thing that we really need to make sure as fiscal conservatives, which is why I'm a proud member of the Georgia Tea Party, is we have to be fiscally responsible with the dollars that have been given to us by the hardworking people of this state. $6 billion, over $6 billion of our budget is devoted to public education in this state. I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, do you think you're getting money's worth?
SecularStupidist.com, Conservative.com, RightOsophy.com.